Imagine building your dream cabin, only to have an HOA president storm in, threaten the sheriff, and try to crush it all within 24 hours. You've got one day to knock down that eyesore, or we're calling the sheriff. Those were the exact words the HOA president shouted at me, moments before I revealed the secret that would tear her entire world apart. I was only 3 days into raising my cabin when she barged onto my land, clipboard in hand, and attitude dialed up to 10. Victoria Ashworth, self-appointed queen bee of the HOA, demanded I rip everything down for violating community standards. The sharp scent of pine sap from fresh lumber clashed with the stifling cloud of her perfume as the gravel crackled under the tires of angry neighbors' SUVs. She waved legal papers, barking about crushing fines, strutting like she ruled the mountains. But she had no idea I held information that would flip this power struggle upside down, information that would make her threats the most expensive mistake of her life. Before I tell you how a single phone call legally dismantled an entire HOA, let me back up. My name's Marcus Brennan, 45, a recently divorced electrician who just inherited 5 acres of Colorado mountain paradise from my eccentric uncle Silas. After months of brutal courtroom battles and nights stuck in a cramped city apartment, this land felt like salvation, a chance to build something real and prove to my teenage daughter Emma that her father wasn't a total failure. Uncle Silas had always been the family enigma. He vanished into the mountains in 1980, only appearing at Christmas smelling of wood smoke and diesel, muttering that land held more secrets than trees. Most relatives dismissed him as the crazy hermit uncle. But when his lawyer called to say I'd inherited his property, I realized Uncle Silas may have known something none of us ever imagined. The land was nothing short of breathtaking. A creek bubbled over polished stones, hawk cries rang across granite cliffs, and the sharp aroma of pine sap mingled with wild sage to create nature's own perfume. An old concrete foundation hinted at a project Silas once began, and a weathered workshop stood like something from a frontier museum. Breathing in air untainted by exhaust fumes, I felt hope surge through me for the first time in months. I emptied my 401k, quit the city job, and committed to raising a modest log cabin. Nothing extravagant, just a sturdy home where Emma could spend weekends and see her dad building something meaningful instead of falling apart. The steady rhythm of hammer meeting nail, the clean bite of a saw through timber. After endless months of legal battles, the raw honesty of physical work felt like therapy. On the 3rd day of construction, she appeared. Victoria Ashworth emerged from a spotless white BMW X5 like some corporate angel of death. Mid-50s, clad in designer business casual, gripping a leather portfolio as though it were armor. Her heels struck the rocky ground with military precision, and her perfume, a floral chemical weapon, clashed so violently with the mountain air it burned my eyes. "Excuse me," she called, striding across my property as though she owned it. "Are you the individual responsible for this unauthorized construction?" I put down my circular saw, noting how she spat out individual like the word itself disgusted her. "Marcus Brennan? Building a cabin on my land? And you must be Victoria Ashworth, Pine Valley HOA." Victoria rifled through her stack of papers with exaggerated authority. "This construction violates multiple community covenants. No permits, no architectural review, no environmental assessment. Honestly, this rustic project threatens our property values." I looked around at the untouched wilderness stretching to the horizon. Community? What community? I don't see a single house. "The Pine Valley Homeowners Association governs all residential properties within this jurisdiction," she said, pulling out an official-looking document. "Your uncle signed these covenants when the association was formed 6 months ago. You've inherited his obligations." 6 months ago? My uncle had been dead for 8. She shoved a cease and desist order into my hand, demanding an immediate halt to construction, plus a bill for $2,500 in violation penalties. "Remove all materials within 48 hours, Victoria declared. "Daily fines begin at $500 and double every week. We protect our community standards very seriously." The threat hung in the thin mountain air like smoke. But then she delivered the real blow. "Let me be frank, Mr. Brennan." Her gaze swept over my worn clothes, dented truck, and calloused hands. "This isn't the kind of neighborhood where people in your situation typically last. We have expectations about resident quality. I'd hate for your daughter to feel embarrassed by any unpleasantness." The mention of Emma struck like a punch to the gut. She had researched me, knew about my divorce, my financial struggles, my kid? Are you threatening my family? The words left my mouth colder than I intended. Victoria's smile stayed fixed in place. Her smile was sharp as winter wind. "I'm offering friendly advice. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when you're clearly outmatched." She slid back into her BMW, but paused before pulling away. 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As her taillights vanished down the mountain road, Uncle Silas's final words echoed in my mind. "Don't let anyone push you around." I stared at the cease and desist order, then at my half-built cabin. Victoria Ashworth thought she held all the power. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. She didn't even wait the full 48 hours. The next morning she returned, this time with a lawyer and the smugness of someone carrying handcuffs in her back pocket. A battered Honda Civic rolled in behind her BMW and outstepped the sorriest excuse for legal counsel I'd ever seen. Douglas Cranky looked like he'd earned his law degree out of a cereal box: cheap suit, coffee-stained tie, and a briefcase held together with duct tape and desperation. "Mr. Brennan," Victoria declared with her usual dramatic flair, "you are being served with official legal documents. Cease construction immediately and prepare for financial consequences." Cranky fumbled with his papers, voice shaking. "Pursuant to Pine Valley HOA covenants, you now owe $15,000 in retroactive violation penalties. Furthermore, you never received proper HOA disclosure documents during property transfer, which voids your ownership claims." 15 grand for building on my own land? The stench of Cranky's nervous sweat mixed with Victoria's suffocating perfume, forming a toxic haze of intimidation. "I'll review these with my attorney," I said evenly. Victoria's laugh cracked like ice. "You can't afford an attorney, Mr. Brennan. Save yourself the embarrassment." The moment they left, I drove straight to the county courthouse, where Betty, the friendly clerk, helped me sift through property records. The musty scent of old paper mixed with the buzz of fluorescent lights, creating the vibe of a low-budget detective film. That's when I uncovered something that made my blood run hot. The Pine Valley HOA had been formed exactly 6 months ago, 2 months after Uncle Silas died. I remembered my divorce attorney once saying that timing in legal documents is everything, and this timing was flat out impossible. The HOA's boundaries had been drawn like a bullseye around my land, wrapping in just 12 houses. My 5 acres accounted for 60% of their total land area. "That's mighty suspicious," Betty whispered over the property maps. "Looks like somebody drew those lines just to trap your uncle's land." Digging deeper, I found every single HOA member was either related to Victoria or tied to her husband's construction company. This wasn't governance, it was organized crime dressed up with a clipboard. I'd read enough legal thrillers to know 2 things. Dead men can't sign new contracts, and you can't be bound by agreements created after you already own the land. That was my opening. Time for a counterpunch. I called Sarah Kim, a razor-sharp real estate attorney. Her office smelled of fresh coffee and hard determination.
"This is legally impossible," Sarah said as she spread the documents across her conference table. "You cannot retroactively bind a dead man to covenants created after his death. I've seen HOA scams before, but this one is brazen even by their standards." "We're filing countersuits," Sarah announced. "Harassment, false claims, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we'll investigate how they managed to include your property in boundaries drawn after ownership transfer." But Victoria didn't waste time. 2 days later, she staged an emergency community meeting without so much as telling me. My neighbor Jake went, of course, and later filled me in over beers on my porch. The evening air carried the scent of wood smoke from far-off fireplaces, mingling with pine and reminding me why I'd fallen in love with this land. "She's got everyone spooked," Jake said. "Claims you're some shady drifter with a criminal record. Pure lies, but in small towns, fear always outruns the truth." Then came the digital warfare. Victoria launched a Pine Valley Community Safety Facebook group, plastering my photo, lifted from an old union newsletter, next to warnings about transient criminals threatening children and property values. The comments were poison. "Get this predator out. My kids aren't safe. Sheriff needs to act now." But arrogance became her undoing. In her rush to prove the HOA had the resources to crush troublemakers, Victoria posted their financial records publicly.
Those numbers told a story more damning than anything I could have uncovered. $847,000 collected in special assessments over 6 months for just 12 houses. That meant more than 70 grand per family. And for what? No parks, no amenities, no shared, no facilities, no infrastructure, nothing to show for nearly $1 million. I'd learned during my divorce that legitimate expenses always leave a paper trail. When lawyers can't point to where the money went, it usually means it slipped into someone's pocket. Sarah nearly spit out her coffee when I showed her the Facebook post. She just publicly admitted to massive financial fraud. Victoria handed us a federal case on a silver platter. The next morning, Victoria played her nuclear card. A county inspector's truck rolled into my driveway. The man looked miserable as he handed me a citation listing multiple building violations that would halt construction completely. "Sorry, buddy," he muttered, eyes fixed on the ground. "Orders from the top. Someone's got serious pull at the county office." The metallic taste of corruption lingered in the mountain air like distant smoke. Watching his truck disappear down the road, I knew Victoria had just crossed a line she could never step back from. She'd escalated from civil harassment to weaponizing government officials, using taxpayer-backed power to settle a personal vendetta. But in doing so, she'd given me the nuclear option. Federal investigators don't stop at financial fraud. They follow the trail into the offices of public officials who accept bribes to harass private citizens. Victoria thought she was playing chess while I was stumbling through checkers. She had no idea I was about to flip the entire board. Victoria's next. At 3 a.m., the attack came. Shards of glass, the acrid bite of diesel, and the world jolting me awake. I stumbled outside to a scene that looked like it had been raided. My lumber pile smashed to kindling as if someone swung a bat through it. 2x4s strewn like giant pickup sticks. My generator toppled and leaking fuel into the pine duff with that chemical sting that made my eyes water. And roofing nails scattered across the access road like gleaming tire-puncturing confetti. The message was brutal and clear. Victoria had escalated beyond legal theatrics. By sunrise, my truck sat on 4 flat tires, and an anonymous EPA complaint had landed in my inbox accusing me of destroying sensitive wetlands, the same seasonal creek that had quietly run through my land long before Victoria was ever born. The psychological warfare only intensified. By noon, cars began appearing around my driveway, never fully blocking it, which would be flagrantly illegal, but positioned to force me into ridiculous maneuvers just to reach my property. When I confronted the drivers, they played innocent, claiming to be concerned citizens exercising their rights on public roads. The air tasted of manufactured virtue, still fouled by diesel.
Then official-looking hazardous construction zone, authorized personnel only signs began popping up. Each fake detail calculated to make the harassment appear lawful and to wear me down. The fake warning signs popped up along the mountain road like toxic mushrooms, convincing enough to spook my contractor, Pete. He called me in a panic. "Marcus, 3 clients just asked if I handle hazardous waste cleanup." His voice cracked with worry. "Rumor is your site's contaminated. I can't afford to lose other jobs over this." Victoria had twisted my own network against me, turning whispers into weapons. I once read that skilled con artists never invent tools. They steal yours and use them against you. She was proving that theory word for word. But sabotage reeked of desperation, and desperate people leave footprints. The next morning, Sarah and I dug through courthouse records, the scent of old paper mixing with Betty the clerk's strong coffee as the truth unfolded. Mountain Vista Resorts had pitched the county on a $50 million luxury project 6 months earlier, and my 5 acres weren't an obstacle, they were the crown jewel. Spa views, golf course elevation, helicopter pad convenience. The agreement clearly stated no groundbreaking without securing every property inside the designated tourism zone. Betty's finger landed on a single buried line in the paperwork. "Look here," she whispered. "Mountain Vista paid $400,000 for community relations consulting." Sarah froze, coffee cup suspended midair. "Consulting?" she said. "That's not consulting, that's a bribe dressed in a business card." In that moment, the entire puzzle snapped into place. Victoria's aggressive timeline suddenly made sense. She wasn't merely collecting HOA dues, she was angling for a huge commission by delivering my land to developers. Every day I held out cost her hundreds of thousands in projected resort profits. That night, I put my electrician skills to work installing a full security system, motion sensors, night vision cameras.
The whole setup, so if she escalated to outright crime, I'd have it on film. I didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, a pickup eased down my access road with its lights off, engine barely whispering through the dark. The driver, hood up but with a jawline I recognized, poured fuel from a gas can onto my lumber pile. My cameras captured it in crisp detail, even the moment he stared straight into the lens like a deer frozen in headlights. Tommy Ashworth, Victoria's 20-something son, apparently blessed with his mother's flair for felony-level stupidity. The next morning, I delivered my counterpunch, USB drives of video evidence to the sheriff, Tommy's midnight arson attempt, facial recognition matches, and license plate data. Victoria's concerned citizen narrative collapsed faster than her son's alibi under questioning. But I kept digging. HOA filings exposed a goldmine of fraud, security consulting payments to phantom companies, landscaping invoices paid to Victoria's brother-in-law in Florida, and legal research bills that read like a laundering ledger. She'd been systematically looting the HOA coffers while positioning herself to cash in on the resort, stealing from neighbors now and planning to profit from their land tomorrow. As I watched Tommy's arson footage for the 5th time that evening, the mountain air thick with pine and the promise of rain, a key truth hit me. Victoria wasn't merely greedy, she was desperate and trapped. The resort deal had deadlines, and every day I held out meant she risked losing everything. Cornered animals lash out hardest, and they also make the strangest, most obvious mistakes. Her reaction to her son's arrest was swift, vicious, and unhinged. The next morning, a process server stood on my doorstep with an emergency injunction. Victoria claimed I was erecting an illegal commercial operation and demanded the court force me to tear everything down immediately. The papers accused me of planning transient housing for undesirable elements that would ruin the community's moral fabric. The smell of fresh ink mixed with morning pine as I read 15 pages of creative fiction. She wanted $100,000 in community damages and an immediate restraining order barring me from my own property. That was the opening salvo. By noon, 3 county inspectors swarmed my land like locusts: environmental compliance, building safety, septic evaluation, writing citations for violations that didn't exist.
The lead inspector, Rodriguez, kept whispering apologies as he photographed my legal electrical work. "Sorry, man," he mouthed. "Orders from way above my pay grade. Someone's paying serious money to make your life hell." The metallic taste of corruption hung thicker than the fog rolling down the ridge. During my divorce, I discovered that when legal pressure doesn't succeed, bureaucratic harassment takes its place. Endless inspections, unreasonable demands, and slow suffocation by paperwork. Yet Victoria saved her most vicious strike for the end. That afternoon, my ex-wife Linda called, trembling with fury. "Marcus, what's happening? Emma's friends are showing her Facebook posts saying you're a sex offender." Emma had locked herself in her room, crying, asking if her father was really a monster. My blood turned to ice. "What posts?" I demanded. "A community safety group shared your picture with claims about predators targeting children. Total lies." But Emma's classmates treated her like she was tainted. Linda's voice broke. She asked if Emma was even safe visiting me. The idea of my 15-year-old seeing those lies, enduring whispers and pointing, filled me with blind rage. Victoria had turned my daughter into a weapon, crossing every boundary. "It's all false, Linda. I'm battling a corrupt HOA trying to grab my land for developers." "Fix this," she snapped. "Some judges view social media scandals as damaging to children. This could hurt your custody rights." After she hung up, I sat in Uncle Silas's workshop, surrounded by the scent of old wood and motor oil filled the workshop, 40 years of family history weighing on me. This had stopped being just about land. Victoria was attacking the one relationship that mattered most. Yet her panic had opened a door for me. That evening, my neighbor Jake knocked, breathless with news. "Marcus, Victoria's group posted another emergency alert. Says you threatened to burn down the neighborhood." They'd used a photo of me holding something that looked like a weapon. It was just my circular saw, but cropped and angled to seem menacing. The Facebook thread was a frenzy. "Call SWAT, armed and dangerous, protect our children." Then Jake leaned in with the real scoop. 3 HOA families came to him in private. Victoria was threatening to raise their assessments unless they signed statements against me. They were scared of her now, not me. Worse, HOA treasurer Beth Morrison had started asking about missing funds. Victoria had been dodging audits while pushing for more special assessments. "Beth found invoices for companies that don't exist," Jake whispered. "Payments for work never done." She was demanding a full financial review, and Victoria was panicking. That was my opening. I called Sarah right away. Victoria's financial house of cards was collapsing. If we forced an emergency HOA audit before she buried the evidence, we'd have her. "Even better," Sarah said. "False sex offender accusations can be prosecuted as federal defamation. We can bring criminal charges while chasing the financial fraud." But I wanted to hurt Victoria where it counted, her wallet. The next morning, I drove to every business the Ashworths owned or frequented, screenshots in hand of her lies branding me a predator. And I had calm, factual talks with managers about their exposure if they tolerated or amplified defamatory campaigns. Small mountain towns survive on reputation. When the auto shop, the grocery, and the hardware quietly began to turn the Ashworths away, gossip spread faster than wildfire. By afternoon, Victoria's mother was on the phone demanding an explanation for why the family was being shunned. That night, with storm clouds gathering over the peaks and rain tapping the windows of my cabin, I felt the tide shift. Victoria had overreached, attacking too many fronts while her financial schemes were coming to light. Still, I knew desperate people don't fold quietly. They try to blow everything up. The scent of incoming rain and pine sap pulled Uncle Silas's last words about the land's secrets back into my head. Tomorrow I would understand exactly what he meant, and Victoria Ashworth would learn that some secrets can topple whole kingdoms. The next morning I pried up the workshop floorboards, and my crowbar rang against something that wasn't wood. A metallic clang that cut through the dust like a bell calling destiny. Beneath 40 years of sawdust and motor oil stains, I uncovered a steel lockbox the size of a briefcase, painted military green and secured with a combination likely set back in the Carter administration. When I finally cracked it open with Uncle Silas's birthday, the same day he'd bought the land, a musty rush of old paper hit me. Manila folders as thick as phone books, corporate seals heavy as coins, and stacks of legal forms crowded the box. But it was the incorporation certificate on top that made my hands tremble. Brennan Holdings, LLC, incorporated March 15, 1998. Sole proprietor, Silas J. Brennan. My uncle hadn't merely owned 5 acres of mountain refuge. 27 years earlier, he'd created a holding company and quietly assembled something that could upend everything. The next file spelled out the financial masterstroke. In 2010, when the Pine Valley developer went bankrupt in the housing crash, Uncle Silas had swooped in and bought up defaulted mortgage debt for pennies on the dollar. Not the houses, but the land beneath them. Every property in what became Victoria's HOA realm sat on land owned by Brennan Holdings. Homeowners had paid mortgages for years believing they owned their lots. Legally, they were tenants, and the property manager that collected their payments funneled the money to Brennan Holdings, which explained how a reclusive hermit sustained his comforts. I was holding deeds that controlled an entire neighborhood, 47 houses, 12 of which had formed Victoria's cherished HOA, every lot resting on land that by law belonged to me now. The tang of Uncle Silas's pipe tobacco still hung in the workshop, blended with the oppressive weight of documents that felt capable of crushing mountains. I finally understood why he'd buried this secret. Revealing that homeowners didn't actually own their land would shatter families and split the community. But it also offered a different kind of power, one that made my temples throb. Victoria Ashworth, HOA president and mastermind of intimidation, had been collecting dues and levying fines on property she didn't possess. Her own home, the hub of her bullying campaign, sat on land where she was 3 months behind on rent. Legally, I could serve a 30-day eviction notice. The lockbox's bank records spelled it out. Monthly rent funneled into Brennan Holdings accounts, property tax receipts, road and utility maintenance costs that the homeowners thought their HOA fees covered. Uncle Silas had been the unseen landlord for an entire neighborhood, routing rent through a management company while everyone believed they owned their plots. The incorporation papers were authentic, stamped with state seals and notarized by attorneys whose signatures checked out. The deeds matched county records exactly. The bank ledgers were real, and the money trail ran clear as a mountain stream. I sat in his workshop chair, the smell of worn leather and old secrets around me, clutching papers that gave me more leverage over Victoria Ashworth than she could have imagined.
I could evict any HOA member who'd taken part in her campaign. I could sell the whole development to Mountain Vista Resorts and become a millionaire overnight. I could crush lives the way Victoria had tried to crush mine. But Uncle Silas's last words hung in the dusty air. Don't let anyone push you around. He hadn't said push back harder. He'd said don't let them push you around, a subtle but important difference that would shape what kind of man I became. The burden of his secret settled on me like a lead blanket as I spread the incorporation papers across Sarah's conference table, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the gravity of what we'd uncovered. This wasn't just an HOA fight anymore. I was the landlord of the people who'd been trying to ruin me. This is legally airtight, Sarah said, peering at the corporate seal under her lamp. Your uncle was thorough. Every filing in order, every payment documented, 27 years of paper trail. She grabbed a legal pad and started sketching options like a commander mapping a battle. Plan A, reveal your ownership now, negotiate the HOA's dissolution, clean and permanent, removes Victoria for good. Plan B, targeted enforcement, terminate leases only for the ringleaders of the harassment, Victoria, her immediate family, maybe 2 or 3 others, spare the innocent. Plan C, the nuclear route, publicize the whole scheme, trigger a federal probe into the HOA's finances, and upend the whole community. I thought of Emma seeing those monstrous Facebook posts, of neighbors misled by Victoria's lies, of Uncle Silas keeping this power secret for decades. What about Plan D? Use the leverage to build something better. Sarah's eyebrows lifted. Explain. Victoria had been skimming off the top while lying about who actually owned the land. What if we tore the financial crimes into the light but offered the community a path forward? Reduced rents, real chances at ownership. Turn this poisonous HOA into something that helps families instead of wrecking them. While Sarah dove into legal precedents, I rang my electrician buddy Jake to set up the technical side. We went to his shop, the smell of copper and components reminding me I had hands-on skills beyond courtroom maneuvers. "You're going to want this recorded," Jake said as we tested a pro-grade audio rig. "When you drop this bombshell, every word needs to be documented for your legal backstop." Riding in my truck afterward, I thought about an old lesson from my apprenticeship. The most effective electrical systems don't make the biggest sparks. They deliver precisely the right current. Too little and nothing happens. Too much and you burn the place down. This needed calibrated power. That afternoon, I brought in Beth Morrison, the HOA treasurer who'd been asking the awkward questions. We met at the diner, where the smell of apple pie and the rhythm of other people's lives felt like a refuge after weeks of legal fights. "I've been uneasy about the books for months," Beth confessed over coffee that tasted like courage. "Victoria's been dodging audits while levying unprecedented fees. We've paid $847,000 in special assessments this year alone, and I can't trace where it went." I slid photocopies of Victoria's fake invoices across the table. Shell companies, work never done, consulting fees that would raise eyebrows in any audit. Beth's hands trembled as she read. "She's stealing from us while threatening our homes." "But Marcus," she asked, "even if we expose her, how do we shield the families who've poured their lives into these houses, savings tied up in these homes?" That was when I knew Plan D was the right move. Over the next 48 hours, Sarah and I built a presentation with multiple aims. Expose Victoria's theft, but also give the community a constructive way forward that balanced justice with mercy. We prepared legal packets in triplicate, hid copies in separate secure locations, and forwarded dossiers to federal investigators who handle HOA fraud. I called Emma for the first time since Linda's furious phone call. Her voice was small and wounded, but when I walked her through Victoria's lies, I could hear hope returning. "So I'm not actually in danger, Dad?" she asked. "The stuff online is fake." "Completely fabricated, sweetheart. Soon everyone will see the truth," I told her, then added what mattered most. "When someone tries to harm you with lies, you don't fight fire with fire. You serve the truth at the exact right moment." The community meeting was set for Friday night at the Pine Valley Community Center. Victoria had convened it as an emergency to warn about a dangerous threat in our neighborhood, unaware she was handing us the stage for her undoing. That evening I sat in the finished cabin, listened to the creek threading the pines, and watched stars pin themselves into the clear sky, feeling Uncle Silas's quiet presence. He had buried this power for decades, waiting for the right person and moment to use it wisely. That moment had come. Unlike Victoria's scorched earth tactics, this truth would be used to build something better out of the ruins of her greed. Tomorrow night, the truth would get its hearing. Victoria's panic escalated. She even tried to have me committed. On Tuesday morning, a rush of emergency court papers arrived. A petition claiming I was showing signs of instability. Victoria filed a sworn petition accusing me of severe psychological instability and making credible threats against neighbors, somehow persuading a judge that I needed immediate psychiatric evaluation and possible involuntary commitment. The smell of new court papers mixed with my morning coffee as I read her latest fiction. According to her statement, I'd been obsessively surveilling people, threatening to burn houses, and showing textbook signs of paranoid delusion and violent ideation.
She even attached witness statements from 3 HOA members who claimed I'd confronted them at night, ranting about conspiracies and warning I'd make everyone pay. It was all invented, yet it looked frighteningly official. By midday, the situation moved from paperwork to posture. A convoy of pickup trucks massed at the start of my access road. Victoria's so-called citizen patrol, armed with hunting rifles and righteous anger. They hadn't crossed my property line, but their intent was obvious: step out of line and accept frontier justice. The metallic tang of fear cut the mountain air as I watched them through binoculars from my porch. These weren't paid guards, but frightened neighbors convinced I was a real danger. Then Jake called with worse news. Marcus, Victoria's brother-in-law, is the county sheriff. He's planning to serve that mental health warrant this afternoon with a full SWAT response. Says you're armed and dangerous and to use maximum force protocols. My blood turned ice. In my electrician days, I'd wired homes for guys who'd been swatted over petty disputes. Too many of those calls end badly. Those stories too often ended with body bags, accidental shootings during dynamic entries. Yet Victoria's overreach was making unexpected allies. That afternoon, Emma called, not embarrassed, but furious. "Dad, kids at school are showing posts saying you're a terrorist planning to shoot up the neighborhood. This is insane. How can she just lie like this?" I told her, desperate people do desperate things, and sometimes that desperation is their downfall. Emma's voice hardened. She had more of my backbone than I'd realized. What can I do to help? I'm not letting this crazy woman destroy our family. While Victoria plastered the lunatic label on me, she was also frantically cleaning up her books. Sarah's investigator found massive cash withdrawals from HOA accounts, $127,000 in the last 2 weeks alone, supposedly for emergency security consultants and legal fees. Worse, she'd been coercing members into loyalty pledges, promising not to cooperate with outside investigators. 3 families had quietly come to Sarah, terrified of Victoria but afraid to speak publicly. Then Victoria's nuclear move blew up in her face. The mental health petition required a professional evaluation, and the form she filed cited Dr. Richard Pettin, who'd been dead for 6 months. Sarah's paralegal uncovered his death certificate while checking the evaluation's authenticity. Victoria had used a corpse's name to try to lend medical weight to her lies. She had literally forged a psychological assessment using a deceased psychiatrist's stolen letterhead and signature stamp. And that one reckless lie had escalated her legal exposure from civil fraud to federal document forgery, a felony that can carry up to 10 years behind bars. "She's completely unraveling," Sarah said as she examined the bogus evaluation. "This level of criminality screams someone facing massive financial exposure. The resort deal must have deadlines she can't push out." But Victoria didn't stop there. Thursday night produced her most spectacular blunder. Frustrated by the stalled SWAT filing because judges tend to frown on obviously forged medical records, she decided to act on her own. Security cameras captured her slipping onto my property around midnight, carrying what looked like an accelerant and matches. Her apparent plan was to start a small blaze by the lumber pile, then dial 911 and accuse me of burning evidence. The irony was perfect. The woman who'd labeled me an arsonist for weeks was literally attempting to set a fire to frame me. My upgraded security, however, flipped the script. Motion-activated floodlights turned midnight the instant she stepped over the boundary. There she was in my driveway, gas can and road flares in hand, lit like a stage actor, while 3 camera angles recorded every gesture. Her shocked, furious scream rolled across the valley like a warning to every wildlife camera, and as she stumbled back to her BMW, I realized she'd handed me
12 hours before the meeting, Brenda made her most desperate move yet. Gerald Thornfield called an emergency closed-door meeting to address what he called escalating liability and safety concerns. His voicemail sounded like he'd swallowed gravel and nerves. The meeting was classic damage control. 3 board members huddled in the community center office while Prescott and Associates attorney Harold Masterson, $400 an hour, tried to figure out how far into legal quicksand they'd sunk. Through the blinds, I watched animated gestures and Brenda waving papers like white flags. Patricia Lopez texted updates from inside. Brenda's accusing you of making terrorist threats, wants emergency powers to seize dangerous modifications. Harold looks like he'd rather be defending serial killers. Their cover-up was as clumsy as Brenda's morning crash attempts. Someone had backdated conflict of interest disclosure forms for Whitmore Construction, but the email server's digital timestamps told the real story. You can't retroactively invent ethics compliance, especially when the original contract votes are recorded in public minutes. At the same time, the insurance probe was gaining momentum. State investigator Maria Santos had subpoenaed HOA financials, meeting minutes, and all communications between Brenda and the association's insurer. The paper trail was as obvious as a slow-motion train wreck. Tuesday afternoon brought a more surprising turn. Richard Whitmore, Brenda's husband, called me in a near whisper. "Marcus," he said, "this has to stop. She spent $8,000 on lawyers, surveillance, and repairs. Our insurance was canceled. The business is losing contracts. What would it take to make this go away?" I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I told him plainly that Brenda had stalked my family, vandalized my property, committed insurance fraud, and embezzled from 127 homeowners. This wouldn't be fixed with an apology and a check. Then, 2 hours before the board meeting, Brenda filed an emergency restraining order using fabricated evidence, fake threatening voicemails, doctored photos, and witness statements from people who didn't exist. The petition was so poorly put together that Judge Patricia Williams dismissed it without a hearing. "Ms. Whitmore," the judge wrote, "these recordings are clearly edited, these photos staged, and these witnesses appear fictional. Submitting false evidence is contempt of court. Consider this your only warning." But Brenda's legal troubles were piling up faster than her car crashes. The state insurance commissioner had assigned Maria Santos to build a fraud case. The district attorney's office was reviewing stalking and harassment charges. The IRS now had copies of financial records showing unreported income from the construction contracts. By 6 p.m., the community center parking lot looked like a Black Friday sale. Cars lined both sides of Maple Street, with neighbors walking from 3 blocks away carrying folding chairs and homemade signs. Channel 7's news van arrived at 5:30 sharp, followed by Channel 12 and a Metro Weekly reporter. Inside, the room was designed for 40, but now packed with 118 residents, with overflow standing against walls and spilling into the hallway. The mix of sweat and burnt coffee made the air heavy. Brenda walked in late, flanked by attorney Harold Masterson, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. She had traded her usual navy blazer for black, and her hands shook noticeably. Gerald Thornfield kept tugging at his tie as if it were choking him. Their attempted intimidation collapsed immediately. Masterson opened with a statement about frivolous complaints and disruptive residents, but Mrs. Olivia rose from her seat, holding her stack of statements. "Excuse me," she said in careful English, "but which one of us has been committing insurance fraud and stealing money?" The room erupted in applause and nervous laughter. 17 neighbors came prepared to speak during public comment, each armed with evidence of Brenda's harassment, shady finances, or selective rule enforcement. The evidence filled 3 banker boxes, video recordings of collisions, contract analyses, notarized statements, and official complaint receipts. But the biggest surprise was still to come. At 6:45, just as Brenda tried to dodge questions about Whitmore Construction, Officer Derek Martinez entered carrying an official folder. "Sorry to interrupt," he said into the silent room, "but I have a warrant to serve regarding insurance fraud and stalking charges." The blood drained from Brenda's face faster than coolant from her damaged Escalade. Masterson leaned in with urgent whispers, while Gerald Thornfield looked like he was about to have chest pains. Game over. Checkmate. The public reckoning was about to begin. The community center had never seen anything like it. All 127 homeowners of Pinewood Gardens filled a room meanwhile. Outrage, questioning Victoria's finances, and the suspicious timing of her escalating accusations. As the last news van rumbled down the mountain road, leaving only tire tracks and the lingering smell of diesel,
I realized she had just torched her own reputation in front of the world. Tonight's community meeting wouldn't be about her wild claims against me. It would be about her neighbors demanding answers about the money she had stolen. The predator had officially become the prey. The Pine Valley Community Center had never seen such a crowd. 89 people crammed into a room built for 60, with news cameras lining the walls and county officials filling the front row like judges waiting for testimony. Judges at a trial, that's what the county officials in the front row looked like. The thick blend of nervous sweat, stale coffee, and decades-old carpet created an atmosphere so heavy it felt almost tangible. Victoria stood at the podium like a commander rallying troops before war. Her slideshow blazed across the screen, boldly titled "Protecting Our Community – The Marcus Brennan Threat Assessment." She had dressed for victory. Tailored business suit, flawless makeup, and a voice projected with the confidence of a stage actor. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clicking to a slide of my cabin, "we are here tonight to address the clear and present danger Marcus Brennan poses to our peaceful neighborhood." I sat quietly in the back, wearing my cleanest work shirt and gripping a leather folder stuffed with enough legal firepower to shatter her empire. Sarah sat beside me, phone in hand, receiving live updates from federal investigators uncovering Victoria's financial corruption. Meanwhile, Victoria delivered a masterclass in deception. She displayed photos of my so-called threatening construction project, screenshots of my supposedly menacing social media posts, actually instructional images I'd uploaded for fellow electricians, and charts linking transient populations to plummeting property values. Her voice sharpened as she delivered her indictment. "This individual owes our community $97,000 in unpaid fines and legal fees. He has repeatedly threatened violence, attempted to intimidate children, and was investigated just yesterday by federal authorities for terrorism-related activities." The crowd stirred, fear and suspicion rippling through the room. These were decent people, but months of Victoria's propaganda had conditioned them. Her performance was so polished, so emotionally charged, she could have convinced them to buy ice in the middle of winter. Eskimos. Furthermore, Victoria pressed on, clicking to a polished financial slide, "Mr. Brennan's continued presence threatens a major economic development opportunity that could benefit every family here. Mountain Vista Resorts has offered our community a $50 million partnership that will create jobs and significantly raise property values." And there it was, the truth laid bare at last, her entire campaign of harassment exposed on record, captured by 3 news cameras and witnessed by county officials. She had finally admitted this was about bulldozing me out for developers. Victoria then invited victim impact statements. 3 neighbors stepped forward, delivering emotional testimonies about how unsafe and terrorized they felt because of me. Their words were so rehearsed, so in sync, it felt less like truth and more like amateur theater. Then came her fatal mistake, the moment that would follow her forever. Does anyone else wish to speak about this dangerous individual threatening our community? I rose slowly, leather folder tucked neatly under my arm. "I do," I said. Victoria's smile wavered, the confidence slipping from her face. You're not a member of this community. You have no right to speak here." I walked calmly toward the front, each step deliberate. "Actually, Victoria," I said, "you'll find I have every right to speak. In fact, I have more rights in this room than anyone else." Murmurs spread like wildfire, support turning to confusion. Victoria's complexion drained to the ashen hue of old snow as I reached the podium. "My name is Marcus Brennan," I declared, raising my voice for the cameras, "and I am the sole owner of Brennan Holdings, LLC." I opened the folder and lifted Uncle Silas's incorporation documents high enough for every lens to capture, which means I am the legal landlord of every single home in this subdivision. The silence that followed was absolute, so deep it seemed you could hear heartbeats echoing in the room. And then, in a single crashing moment, chaos erupted. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping, the sound of a community's reality shattering all at once. Chairs screeched as neighbors turned to stare at one another, realizing for the first time that they weren't owners but tenants. Victoria lunged for my documents like a drowning woman reaching for a lifeline. "That's impossible! This is our neighborhood! We own these!"
Homes! You own the structures, Victoria, I countered, but the land beneath them has belonged to me for 27 years through my uncle's holding company. I fanned the property deeds across the podium like a dealer laying down winning cards. Every monthly payment you thought went to your mortgage company, it was rent forwarded to Brennan Holdings. And every HOA fee you've been collecting, that was theft, money stolen for managing land you never owned. Sheriff Davidson stepped forward, his face grim. "Mrs. Ashworth, you've been collecting fees on property that legally belongs to Mr. Brennan." Victoria's mask cracked into full panic. "You can't do this! I built this community! You're just some drifter who doesn't belong here!" I pulled out a final document and held it high. "Actually, you're 3 months behind on your own rent, which gives me the legal right to evict you with 30 days' notice." The room erupted, gasps, shouts, chaos. Victoria lunged again, shrieking about property rights and community standards until Sheriff Davidson had to physically restrain her. "But I'm not here for revenge," I said firmly over the din. "I'm here to offer partnership. Those who joined harassment campaigns, you have 30 days to relocate. Everyone else, your rent just got cut in half. And together, we're going to build a real community." At that moment, federal agents swept into the room, placing Victoria under arrest for wire fraud. Her final scream echoed through the rafters, desperate and unhinged. "You can't do this to me! I am this community!" But communities aren't built on theft and lies. They're built on truth. 3 months later, I sat on my cabin porch, watching neighborhood children laugh and play freely in what used to be Victoria's so-called restricted access area. That's when Emma arrived for her weekend visit, her face glowing with joy and news that lifted my heart higher than the mountain peaks. "Dad," she said, beaming, "I got into Colorado State with a full scholarship," announced, wrapping me in a bear hug that carried the scent of her mother's shampoo and the spark of teenage hope. And do you know what convinced the admissions committee? My essay about how my father showed me that real strength isn't about revenge, but about creating something better from the ruins of corruption. Victoria Ashworth was serving 18 months in federal prison and paying $150,000 in restitution to the families she had defrauded. 6 of her loyal accomplices had quietly left town, their leases canceled and their misconduct permanently recorded. The remaining 41 neighbors embraced our community's rebirth with a passion that surprised even me. The air was rich with the smell of barbecue smoke drifting from Jake's backyard, where half the neighborhood gathered for our monthly potluck. These same people who had once treated me like a dangerous intruder now brought casseroles, borrowed tools, and sought my advice on everything from wiring problems to raising teenagers. "It's amazing how quickly fear fades once the person fueling it is gone," Sarah remarked as she joined Emma and me on the porch, a beer in hand and a satisfied smile of someone who had helped David topple Goliath. Our professional alliance had grown into something deeper, built on mutual respect and our triumph over corruption. The community's transformation surpassed my wildest hopes. With rents slashed to half their old mortgage costs, families now had money for renovations, education, and true emergency savings. Mrs. Peterson turned what had once been the site of Victoria's petty citation campaigns into a thriving community garden. The children who used to be warned against me now knocked on my door, asking for help with science projects, fascinated by the tale of the electrician who had outwitted the powerful with nothing but patience and paperwork. But the greatest change of all was the creation of the Silas Brennan Community Justice Fund, built from the money reclaimed from fraud, Victoria's fraudulent schemes.
The fund now provided free legal aid to families battling corrupt homeowner associations across 3 states and had already uncovered similar financial crimes in 17 different communities. "We got another call yesterday," Sarah said, glancing at her phone. "A family in Oregon is facing the exact same tactics. Their city council wants to seize their farm for an Amazon warehouse, using the same bogus community benefit arguments Victoria pushed with her resort plan." Emma looked up from her scholarship letter, her eyes shining with determination she clearly inherited. "Are we going to help them, Dad?" "We're going to try, sweetheart. Uncle Silas always said real power builds communities instead of tearing them apart." The financial resolution had proven unexpectedly restorative. Instead of chasing profits,
I gave longtime residents the chance to buy their land at cost with zero-interest financing through the Justice Fund. Most stayed and became true homeowners for the first time in generations. As for the development rights Victoria had promised to Mountain Vista Resorts, I donated them to the Colorado Conservation Trust, protecting the wilderness for Emma's children and their children to explore. Property values rose, not despite the shift to cooperation, but because of it. Turns out people will pay more to live in a place where neighbors help rather than harass. As purple twilight sank over the peaks, I found myself thinking about Uncle Silas's quiet wisdom. He had safeguarded the secret of ownership for decades, waiting for the right moment and the right hands to use it for good. Some secrets, dangerous in the wrong grip, become instruments of justice when wielded by the right person. Emma was still thumbing through college brochures under the porch light when Sarah handed me a thick envelope postmarked from Portland. "That Oregon family I mentioned," she said, "they heard about our victory, and they want to know if—" The man who had dismantled a corrupt HOA now faced a new challenge, helping a family save their century-old farm from corporate greed. I opened the envelope, breathing in the promise of hope and fresh battles ahead. Another David versus Goliath fight. Another chance to prove that ordinary people, armed with determination, can still topple corrupt systems. "Ready for your old man to take on City Hall next, Emma?" I asked. Her grin carried both mischief and pride. "Let's do it, Dad. But this time, I want to help with the legal research." As we mapped out our next fight for justice, the sound of children's laughter carried across the valley, where once only Victoria's threats echoed. Sometimes the greatest victory is creating something so beautiful it wipes away the memory of ugliness. Share your own HOA nightmare in the comments. You're not alone, and your story might help another family standing up to corruption. If this tale gave you clarity about your rights against predatory associations, hit subscribe and ring the bell for more HOA stories, where we shine a light on power-hungry neighbors and the legal strategies ordinary people can wield. Next week, when City Council tried to steal our family farm for an Amazon warehouse, they didn't count on great-grandpa's mining claims. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh, shake your head, or recognize the madness of HOA drama, hit like and share your thoughts below. We post HOA chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so don't miss the next unbelievable chapter. "Ready for your old man to take on City Hall next, Emma?" I asked. Her grin carried both mischief and pride. "Let's do it, Dad. But this time, I want to help with the legal research." As we mapped out our next fight for justice, the sound of children's laughter carried across the valley, where once only Victoria's threats echoed. Sometimes the greatest victory is creating something so beautiful it wipes away the memory of ugliness. Share your own HOA nightmare in the comments. You're not alone, and your story might help another family standing up to corruption. If this tale gave you clarity about your rights against predatory associations, hit subscribe and ring the bell for more HOA stories, where we shine a light on power-hungry neighbors and the legal strategies ordinary people can wield. Next week, when City Council tried to steal our family farm for an Amazon warehouse, they didn't count on great-grandpa's mining claims. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh, shake your head, or recognize the madness of HOA drama, hit like and share your thoughts below.
We post HOA chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so don't miss the next unbelievable chapter.